All right, Ken, you ready to get started?
I think we are ready to rock and roll. Let's do it.
Great. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. My name is Sarah Doherty, and I'm the marketing manager here at Richardson, and I'll be your host today for a 30-minute webinar on connecting sales capabilities to leading and lagging indicators. Before we jump in, just two quick reminders. We've reserved a few minutes at the end for Q&A, but feel free to submit questions via chat or the Q&A functions as we go through the webinar. And we are recording today's session and plan to send it out to all of you later in the afternoon. Okay, so let me introduce our speaker for today, Ken Cross. Ken is our Director of Sales Enablement Solutions and Senior Product Manager. He specializes in enhancing sales effectiveness globally and leverages his expertise in developing sales technology solutions used by some of the world's leading companies. Ken, I'm going to hand it over to you to get us started if everything sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you so much, Sarah. Really
Yep.
appreciate the introduction and welcome everybody. I'm excited today to take all of you through this webinar where we're actually going to explore how to connect sales capabilities to both leading and lagging indicators. And it's our hope by the end of this session, you'll have a somewhat clearer approach on really how to define what good looks like for your sales team and to align their behaviors with measurable outcomes. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. So we're actually going to start by walking backwards. Let me explain what that means. So to really help you to define success for your sales team, we're going to take a bit of a backward approach. We'll actually start by looking at the broader organizational strategy or objectives and key results known as OKRs. I'm sure some of you use that term on this call. But then we're going to move through the leading indicators and metrics, and finally to the capabilities that will drive these outcomes. So this backward approach actually allows us to map out the behaviors and the skills that will enable your team to achieve your strategic goals. It's a proven way to really ensure alignment between what's happening at the organizational level and then actually what's happening on the field, on the ground with your teams, literally when they show up on calls, execute on their opportunities, etc. Now, before we go a little bit deeper into this walking backwards approach, I'd love to hear a little bit of feedback from everybody on the call. As Sarah mentioned, we're going to be leveraging the chat function today. So if you could find the chat function within Zoom, I'd love to hear some feedback from everybody on really what you're hoping to learn from today's webinar. So pop open the chat, throw some comments in there, share, collaborate, and let's see what you're hoping to get from today's webinar. Oh boy. All right. We're already seeing some comments flashing through there. Okay. Looking for some ideas on, yeah, some ideas on KPIs, some ideas on metrics and measurement. Okay. Good stuff. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Oh, great question. Somebody popped in. I saw the word. They're flashing by me very quickly, but I saw a comment about implementing this and how you implement this and where in the process and things like that. So yeah, great comments. Okay. All right. Well, keep the comments coming. We're definitely going to take a look at those throughout the call to make sure that we're focusing on the right things on the webinar today. So let's go ahead and dig a little bit deeper for everyone. So we're actually going to begin by, throughout this whole process, we're actually going to begin by understanding your organization's strategy. Okay. If you already have OKRs in place, that's a great place to start. If not, think about the goals that you've set for your team or organization over the next 1 to 3 years. Maybe you have a 3-year planning horizon. Maybe it's a 5-year planning horizon. For example, do you aim to move maybe towards more of a subscription-based business model? We've seen a lot of our clients move in that direction. Or maybe you're shifting from product to managed services or focusing on growing enterprise accounts or growing emerging markets. So it's these strategic goals that really form the foundation for this backward planning process approach. Now, to get you thinking, we're going to share a few examples of organizational goals we've encountered from clients that we work with. So, can you give a couple examples of what we've been seeing lately from clients we've been speaking to? So, companies we worked with, they might be moving again, maybe to a subscription-based model, or maybe they're targeting triple-digit growth from new clients, for example, or maybe moving towards more enterprise accounts, etc. these are examples of goals that are directly aligned with the objectives of the revenue team. But often, this is actually where the gap starts to widen. It's like right here. This is where it happens. So how do you actually connect these broader goals all the way down to the day-to-day activities of your sales team? From how they execute to their sales motions to even actually how they show up on a client call, how they interact with your clients. And that's exactly what we're going to cover today. So let's dig a little bit deeper here. But because just having these strategic goals alone is not enough, instead, you also need clear and measurable indicators to actually prove that you've achieved these goals. So we need to measure the success of your strategy. So this is actually where we get into the how you're actually going to measure the success of that strategy. So imagine you're sitting in a board meeting, maybe a year from now, ready to celebrate as a team. What does that slide look like? What metrics actually prove that you've achieved those goals that you've set as an organization and as a sales team? What do those metrics actually look like? These are the lagging indicators. Okay, just to be clear, these are the very lagging most indicators, but these are how you would actually sit down, review as a team, maybe on a certain cadence. Year from now, you're celebrating. These are the types of things that you might see on a slide like that. But however, if you only focus on the lagging indicators, we won't know if you're actually on track until you've completed the journey. You won't know until a year from now, for example, or months from now in the future. But that's where leading indicators come in because they help you to monitor that progress along the way. They offer early warning signs or signs of success before the final results are in. These are the metrics that tell you if you're actually headed off in the right direction. Even if the ultimate goal is months away, these will tell you, are you actually moving in the right direction and basically on track? Now, before we go into further detail, we're going to use the chat function again. You guys are so good at the chat function. Let's do it again. I'd love to hear from everyone on the call. What are some of the leading indicators you use in your sales organization? So find the chat box again, throw some comments in there. Again, what are some of the leading indicators you use within your sales organization? Ooh, yeah, number of opportunities in the pipeline. That's a good one. All right, okay. Got some stuff coming in here. Customer interactions. Yeah, how are you actually interacting with your clients? Lead to op conversion. Yes, we hear that a lot. Excellent. Yeah, there's some good ideas coming in here. By the way, guys, get ideas from the chat There's a lot of great ideas coming into the chat. Take a peek at it throughout the call. You might want to take some notes on some of those ideas too as we're moving through the presentation. All right, great stuff. Good stuff, guys. So remember our goal a couple minutes ago, we were talking about we're going to walk backwards from strategy to define how you actually reach that success. Well, by doing this, you actually build that clear path from the big picture all the way down to the specific finite actions that your team needs to take. So we're going to go a little bit deeper in this area. Really, what does it mean to walk backwards next? So let's bring up an example. This might be a good way to look at the world through the lens of, well, how would this actually play out with a real example? So let's take a specific example here. Let's imagine that we achieved X% growth in revenues from net new customers. But let's walk backwards from that, asking ourselves, what happened just before we hit that goal, right? Because there were some things that happened before we hit that lagging indicator, because that's a lagging indicator way in the future. But we'd like to, for example, in this case, take a little bit of a step back here and figure out, okay, how did we get here? So we'd actually likely see revenue balance shift from existing customer upsells to maybe more net new customer sales. And before that, we'd see growing pipeline in new accounts. But even further back, even before that, we're walking backwards now, even before that, we'd actually see more successful meetings in new accounts. So this is a good example of moving all the way from, hey, we grew revenues and net new customers, but how did we get there? It actually all started all the way on the right-hand side of this. We just simply had more successful meetings and net new accounts. In simple terms, if we think about what the leading indicators for this strategy would be, so we have this strategy here, but the leading indicators would be things like pipeline and net new accounts, average opportunity values in net new accounts, And then finally, the very earliest indicator that we got down to was successful meetings in net new accounts. So as a result of this process, we could actually capture the key elements that we would measure in this example all along the way. Actually, even starting again, the and before that section, all the way on the right, the number of successful meetings. So that's actually where that starts. But there's a big but here though. So and this is where a lot of people get wrapped around the axle. We see this a lot with many clients that we work with, and that is giving your managers and your reps too many leading indicators to coach to, because then what happens is it just causes chaos and confusion when you have too many metrics to coach to, too many of these indicators. So instead, we actually recommend that you split them into two categories. This is the easiest way to manage it. So then you have your category of elements for driving manager-seller conversations. And then you have your metrics you monitor at the organizational level to really guide initiatives and to guide training. So in this example, those metrics we talked about a minute ago, we could break those down for a manager level of things like number of successful meetings in net new accounts, pipeline in net new accounts, meeting intelligence insights, for example. That's actually using technology to identify how are they actually showing up for the meeting and what are they actually doing in these meetings? Are they asking discovery questions? Are they listening? Or et cetera? Those are things that can be more on the manager-led level. Whereas then that second bucket, the sales enablement-led level, are things like average deal size or number of days to win deals, sales velocity, et cetera. So this way, by actually breaking these down, this ensures that both leaders and teams are really focused on what truly drives success and really helps to sharpen that focus rather, again, than sowing confusion and chaos by having too many things all organized in a chaotic or unorganized in a really chaotic fashion. So how do we break these down though? So we've gotten to a point again where we have leading indicators, but how do we actually break these down into actionable steps, very finite actionable steps? So you can sort of think about it like peeling back the layers of an onion. So for each of these leading indicators, you need to ask what specific actions or behaviors drive that outcome. So each step will get us actually closer to understanding the exact capabilities and the exact skills that you need to focus on and that you need to strengthen. Again, this backward approach. Now we're getting down to the how do we actually behave? What are the actual skills? So we're going to use the chat function again. And I'd love to hear some feedback from everybody on the call. So we're going to use the chat function. In this case, in the chat, post what capabilities, behaviors, or maybe you use competencies even. There's probably some competency users on the call as well that you use to measure success within your sales team. Again, this is down at the capability level, the behavior level, or even competency level. So drop some ideas into the chat box. Again, it's a great window into what's going on out there. So I encourage folks, scroll through it, take a look and see what some of the responses are. All right, we're seeing a number of things popping up in there. Oh, understanding customer needs. That's a good one, right? That's a behavior. So yeah, that's something that you can do. Communication. Yeah, seeing a lot of great ideas popping in there as well. Active listening is a great one. Asking the right questions. Yeah, that's a good one. Very good one. Very relevant. Questioning skills, etc. So yeah, seeing a lot of great things scrolling through on the chat box. All right, great feedback, everybody. So next, let's actually focus on one specific indicator. So now we're going backwards again. We're going to focus on one specific indicator, peel back the layers of the onion, and really take a deep dive into what's happening here. So in this specific indicator, we're going to look at successful meetings and net new accounts. Remember our example that's threaded throughout here. We're going back to successful meetings and net new accounts. So imagine you're a fly on the wall and you're observing your very best seller in a meeting with a new account. What are they doing right? What behaviors and what skills are they really demonstrating to achieve that successful outcome? So in this example on the slide, we can see that for us to start to see successful meeting outcomes in net new accounts, we need first, very first thing would be prospecting efficiency and prospecting really effectively to actually get the right people in the meeting. Next, they would need to ensure that they're engaging with stakeholders across the account. And then they would be asking insightful discovery questions. Again, you guys brought that up a couple times. That popped up a few times in the chat. It's great observation. They need to be asking the right insightful questions and so on. So this gives us an example of how we've now taken successful meeting outcomes, and now we've peeled back the layers of the onion to actually, okay, what are the specific things we need to do to achieve successful meetings and net new accounts? Again, we really need to focus on those things like prospecting efficiency and prospecting effectively, getting the right people, asking the right discovery questions, etc. So by walking through this simple scenario that's threaded throughout here, we can actually identify the key actions that are leading to our success in this example. Let's go a little bit further. So from this exercise, we now know that behaviors like prospecting efficiency, prospecting effectiveness, stakeholder management, discovery, and sales meeting execution all contribute to, they're all pointing to successful meeting outcomes. Again, pointing back to what we were tracking here, which was the number of successful meetings in net new accounts. Now, this approach of really taking a look at this approach of working backward from those leading indicators, you can apply this same process to other leading indicators. And there were a number of great leading indicators that all of you shared in the chat box, and very relevant things to measure. Things like I saw pipeline growth or average opportunity values. But this gives you a very clear framework of the capabilities down to the capability levels that basically influence those key metrics. So it allows you to walk all the way backward to what are we actually doing in the real world when we show up, what we're doing day to day as we're interacting even with our clients, even literally in a meeting as well. Gives you a model to follow to really walk that backward. So finally, of course, you can't forget to actually tailor these capabilities to the specific roles within your organization. So for example, you might have your sales development reps, your SDRs. They might be measured by call to meeting conversion, for example. Very relevant thing to measure them. While an account executive might be measured by meeting to opportunity conversion. So in this example, you can see how these are going to be slightly different based on the roles. So you really have to think about how you tailor these capabilities to the specific roles in the organization. So for example, on the SDR side, this is where they prepare and ask insightful questions to uncover various aspects of needs, surfaces and quantifies the customer's pain. Whereas on the AE side, this is maybe more focused on preparing surfaces and quantifies the customer's pain, explores ideas for improvement, etc. So you're really shaping this based on the specific roles as well. So there's an important nuance there that you really need to focus on ensuring that you have this broken down by the roles. So in this case, both the positive indicators and the metrics, so now we're getting down to the metric level, should align with each role to ensure relevance and adoption across the team. So that means, though, that in simple terms, you will have metrics that are broken down by role. Pretty obvious, but thought I'd mention it anyway, because once you get down to that role level, you are going to be measuring them quite differently. And that also means that the goals for those metrics would be different based on the roles. Not only the metrics, but the goals, how they're measured, et cetera, would be broken down differently based on those various roles. Now, at Richardson, we've actually used our 40 plus years of experience to actually build a capability framework that aligns leading and lagging indicators down to those role-based nuances. This framework is actually designed to give you clarity on how to guide your team's development while driving the results that matter to your business, driving the results that matter to your strategy as an organization and matter to how you're going to measure success again, all the way down to the specific role level. Now, this framework is actually supported by a total of 55 behaviors, and it's broken down into, though, three main areas that it's bucketed into. These are things like, for example, the sales methods. The sales methods are the capabilities, really, that sellers must employ to execute sales standards, guidelines, and really executing on the methodology within the organization. And then we have the concept of sales motions. These are the capabilities that sellers employ to execute the sales process in creating, capturing, and growing business as well. And then lastly, sales meetings. We talked about some examples of how sellers show up for a meeting and et cetera. And some of the examples we talked about fell into this bucket of sales meetings. These are the capabilities that sellers would employ to effectively engage their buyers. Now, this framework can give you some great ideas on what good looks like for your organization and for your sales team, and really how to align these behaviors with measurable outcomes. Because everything within this model can then be measured and tracked all the way down to, again, we were walking backwards a little bit earlier today, walking all the way backward to how do you actually behave? What are you actually doing? What are you executing on in the day to day? How do you show up for a meeting, etc.? This entire framework can give you some really good ideas on what good looks like for the organization. And it can also show you how to really align those behaviors again, all the way back to those measurable outcomes that we talked about. So I hope this was fun for all of you. This was really fun. Great collaboration from everybody, and really appreciate everyone's use of the chat here as well. And I hope this gives you some ideas on how you could take this backward approach to really have a structured way to define what success looks like for the sales team, and really how to connect to some of those measurable outcomes. Now, we want to make sure that we have some time for questions. So we're going to open up for questions. Sarah, I'm going to hand it off to you to kind of lead us in some Q&A as well, because I know there are probably a number of questions out there from the folks joining us today.
Great, thanks, Ken. So we do have a complimentary download for you to share with your teams, which is our sales capability framework. You can scan the QR code that's on this slide, and it'll take you to the page to access that. And just as a reminder, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar and the slides later today. All right, let's get to Q&A, if that sounds good, Ken. So Chris just chatted in a question. Oh, I'm sorry. David chatted in a question. How do you define net new account?
Yeah, great question, David. First of all, great to see you here. Glad you were able to join. We'll have to reconnect sometime. Anyway, sorry. So yeah, great question, David. So it's really, in this definition, it would be a new logo, basically, an account you haven't worked with before, brand new, net new client, never sold anything to them before. So again, just an example we had threaded throughout the presentation, but that's how we would define it in this case.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, and then we did have another one come through during the webinar. It is, how do we accurately choose the right leading indicators for our specific business goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so it's a big question. It's a big question, but let me see if I could summarize this. And so basically, when you're really focusing on choosing the right leading indicators, you really need to start by understanding your broader strategic goals. Again, those OKRs that we talked about a little bit earlier, then work backwards. So think of the leading indicators as really the early warning signs that you're on the right path. So you could ask yourself things like, what activities need to happen early in the sales process to achieve the end goals? For example, what metrics would help you predict success actually before you reach that final outcome? So think of these as the predictive indicators, the things that are going to really predict success within the organization. And these are the indicators that really reflect progress actually before revenue actually hits, right? Before deals are actually closed, before the business is actually won, for example. And you really want to make sure, of course, that they are specific, measurable, closely aligned with your team's everyday activities, and try to really choose the indicators that managers can actually coach to and coach their teams on regularly, really keeping them engaged as well. And one other caveat as well is certainly choose things that can be measured. I know this sounds kooky, but occasionally we hear uh, uh, different indicators that folks are looking for that they just quite frankly don't have the capacity or tools or mechanisms or CRM. It's not, they just can't literally track it. So ensure that you're actually choosing things that can actually be tracked and that are trackable. So a couple things to think about there. And of course, this also, just one other note on this as well. This, of course, takes collaboration with your CRM team and with others in the organization so that you can have reports and dashboards and ways of actually tracking and measuring the success over time. So ensure that that's part of your strategy also. It's a great question, relevant topic, and appreciate that.
Thanks,
Sarah,
Ken.
any others?
Sure, we just had one come in. How would you close a sale? Oops, let me scroll up. How would you close a sale for yourself or your organization if you are late to the race of deal closing? Loaded question.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So, couple things to kind of think about there. So this really speaks to the sales strategy. So let's say that you're brought into an opportunity very, very late. Regardless of where you're brought into that opportunity, you need to really be able to look at that opportunity objectively. We have ways of looking at opportunities objectively to really measure the health of that opportunity, whether you were there very, very early on, or maybe you have a buyer that is nearly towards the end of a sales cycle, but then notices you as another vendor and they just want to bring you in and say, hey, what do I want to learn about you. First of all, that's a competitive opportunity typically when that happens. I think you know that though. But I would really recommend taking that opportunity, peeling back the layers of the onion and looking at it very objectively. Don't look at it through the lens of I feel good, this sounds great, they called me, they want a quote, they want a proposal or whatever. Instead, you really need to understand what is the health of that opportunity across various criteria. For example, do you know who power is? Do you know who the decision maker is in the opportunity? Do you know what the pain is in that opportunity? Have you quantified that pain? Do you know what's causing that pain? So ultimately, you really need to take stock of that opportunity, evaluate it through the lens of, I'm not trying to be negative here, but is it real? And why were we brought in so late? And what is the health of this opportunity? If you really objectively analyze what the health of that opportunity is, that can help you to map out those steps very, very quickly to execute on that opportunity. It's a great question.
Thanks, Ken. Um, do all of these indicators apply to any business model? For example, manufacturing versus distribution, custom manufacturing, services, etc.
Yeah, every client that we work with has very unique ways of measuring their business. I would say that these examples can serve as a catalyst to help you think of more detailed examples for your business, but we work with clients that have very unique needs and are very specialized. So oftentimes you will have very, very specific KPIs and leading and lagging indicators that are very, very unique to your business. And I would also put the caveat out there that it ultimately really depends on what your strategy is. I mean, you really need to work backwards from what are we setting out to achieve as an organization, right? How are we trying to satisfy the needs of our shareholders, satisfy the needs of the market? What are we doing as a business? What's our why as an organization? Ultimately, the big, big strategy is then what would drive you in the direction of how you're actually ultimately going to measure the success. But it starts all the way at the very, very top. What are we setting out to achieve here from a business strategy? It's a great question.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, I think we have time for one more. How can you transition a major account that wants to be transactional, but you want to develop a true relationship with cross-functional interaction on a regular cadence, not just as needed, etc.?
Yeah, so if you're in an organization right now, and let's say your organization is very much focused on the transactional sale, you really need to understand what is the value in moving from a transactional sale to true relationship, because there's a measurable ROI in terms of moving in that direction. Uh, it's an interesting conversation, and it's probably a broader conversation that we have time for in the last couple minutes here. But I would suggest that you understand from a value perspective what the difference is in an organization that's treated like a trusted advisor versus one that's treated as a very transactional vendor. One of the biggest things, though, and I'll wrap this up because I know we're at time here, is that uh, you are very easily picked off from competitors if you are a transactional vendor and you're treated or looked at as a commodity seller, as a transactional, just pick up the phone and I'm going to place an order. You're very easily picked off by competitors. So you can actually measure the success in that area based on competitive risk. So there's huge value in moving then to becoming a trusted advisor. It's measurable, and it's something that you can start to measure across your accounts. That could be something that you measure across your accounts. And which accounts are we considered just a transactional product pusher versus, hey, we're a trusted advisor within this account? So it's a great question. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ken. Thanks to everyone who sent in questions. This was a really great conversation. But we're going to wrap it up here. Before we let you go, Ken, if you can just click to the next slide, be sure to follow us on LinkedIn for access to sales best practices and thought leadership. And on behalf of myself and Ken and the rest of the Richardson team, thanks for joining us. We'll send you the link of the recording and the slides later today. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Thank you.